Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Parents gather outside of Lethbridge Gymnastics Academy to demand refunds following the sexual allegations of one of its coaches. The Trudeau Liberals want to bring in thousands of more Afghan refugees to Canada, but is enough being done to vet those who are seeking asylum? Political reporter Brian Lilly offers his thought. And we hear from an inventor who grew up in Alberta who is able to turn wastewater into energy.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Parents protested Monday evening and demanded their money back after pulling their kids out of summer camps at the Lethbridge Gymnastics Academy. The academy has shut down since one of the business's former coaches, Jamie Ellicott, was charged with 4 counts of sexually assaulting minors. Video journalist Micah Quinn has more on the changes that parents want to see following the charges laid against Ellicott.
I can't help but to feel that one person doesn't act alone either. Why is he alone with kids? It doesn't make sense to me.
That's according to concerned parent Scott McNeil, who had previously enrolled his daughter Aubrey in summer camps at the Lethbridge Gymnastics Academy. He took her out quickly following the news that Lethbridge police had charged Jamie Ellicott with 4 counts of sexual assault against young girls ranging in age from 7 to 14 years old. Ellicott will appear in court on August 31st to face these charges. McNeil has not been refunded his money yet, saying it seems trivial compared to what the parents and their children are currently going through.
I'd happy give up $300 just to know my daughter's safe and other kids are safe as well. Facilities that don't provide the ability to sit and monitor your children it's not a good facility as far as I'm concerned.
Mallory Christiansen, another concerned parent who has been very vocal about the refunds, has a son herself who is enrolled in the academy. A single child's enrollment for the summer camps costs $300, and up to 4 kids costs $1,200 at the Lethbridge Gymnastics Academy. Christiansen wants to see direct changes that will protect children at places like the LGA moving forward.
For any extracurricular activity that they are put in, we are seeking that there is actually policy and mandates pursuant to ensuring that no child is left one-on-one with the coach. We want to ensure that if there are policies such as the Alberta Gymnastics Federation, it is 2-on-1. That children are actually given the opportunity to understand appropriate and inappropriate touching, that moving forward as a community and as parents, we have the conversation with our children, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
As of Tuesday, the Lethbridge Gymnastics Academy has permanently shut down, and the company has taken down their Facebook page and website as well. Bridge City News reached out to Andrea Seawright, the owner of the Gymnastics Academy, for comment on the story, but we did not hear back before our broadcast deadline. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Alberta NDP finance critic and Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips, along with a Lethbridge senior, expressed their concerns over the province cutting funding for seniors' medical exams for driver's licenses. Phillips says back in 2020, the UCP made the decision to no longer pay Alberta Health to do the seniors' driver's exam. It meant seniors had to pay out of pocket for the test.
So under our government, seniors were not saddled with those extra costs for their driver medical. Now they are. That was a specific decision that was made in 2020 by this government, and it's completely unnecessary because on the other side, they cut corporate taxes for the very, very wealthiest corporations. Those corporations took those billions of dollars elsewhere, didn't create jobs with that money, and left us to make up a whole bunch of new taxes, fees, and other cutbacks. And this is just one example of that.
Lethbridge senior Tom Walton says the Kenney government is just gouging the elderly and that most of their savings are being eaten up.
We have been able to put a little money aside to enjoy our retirement years, but many seniors are not that so positioned. However, our little nest egg is dwindling quickly due to this constant parade of cost increases and add-on payments for services. Watching our savings melt away because of cruel cuts by the current government, we can only imagine the severe stress, anxiety endured by those who aren't fortunate as we are. This fee for a driver's license renewal exam is just one cost increase seniors must face.
Walton adds he isn't against getting the exam, but in his opinion, the fee for the test is just another example of how the UCP isn't helping out our seniors. Alberta's card-carrying Conservative members will choose their new leader on October the 6th. One of the hot-button topics discussed during the UCP leadership race was Alberta potentially bringing in a Sovereignty Act. a suggestion brought forward by UCP leadership frontrunner Daniel Smith. Independent Medicine Hat Cypress MLA Drew Barnes likes the idea of Alberta saying no to certain legislation from Ottawa, but he says he does have some concerns.
There's lots I like about the Sovereignty Act. First of all, it is challenging Ottawa. What concerns me, though, is the timing. The main things we need to do is create our own Alberta infrastructure, collect our own taxes, handle our own unemployment insurance, have our own pension plan. Our own police force is another thing that could be done. Control of our immigration to get the best people in the best spots.
Catch the full interview with Independent Medicine Hat Cypress MLA Drew Barnes and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Many Canadians would argue that the Trudeau Liberals are not doing enough to help curb inflation. Political reporter Brian Lilly says they really don't have a plan outside of encouraging the Bank of Canada to raise its prime rate.
Well, the Prime Minister hasn't come out and said, see, I told you I'd fix inflation, maybe because, well, last summer, or a summer ago, a year ago, he said he didn't think much about it. And they've tried over and over again to say that there's nothing that they could do. So, yeah, there's some Liberal supporters out there trying to claim that, see, the government's plan is working. I wouldn't declare victory just yet, but they don't really have a plan beyond using the Bank of Canada and the rise in interest rates.
Catch the full interview with political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly coming up after Business News. Well, the hot temperatures continued for much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the heat warning from Environment Canada continues.
Yeah, it sure does, Hal. In fact, this stretch of hot weather is expected to persist all week long with daytime highs exceeding 30 degrees. Today we reached 33, overnight low 13 degrees, so still staying in those teens, those double digits. Tomorrow, the only real day, not 30 degrees, but at 29, it might as well be up there in the 30s. It is going to feel very, very hot. And as you see in the 7-day forecast, we will get into some plus 35-degree days. I will have all those details coming up for you later on in the show.
That will be sizzling hot. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Lethbridge fire crews from 3 fire stations responded to a garage fire in the 1600 block of 13th Street North early Tuesday morning. At around 1:18 a.m., firefighters arrived in the alley to find a small fire with smoke coming out of the garage door. Crews were able to quickly get the fire under control. There were no injuries reported, and the damage is estimated to be around $50,000. The cause and origin of the fire is still under investigation. RCMP say the suspect in the homicide of a woman at a senior's home east of Calgary has been found dead. Police responded to a sudden death Friday of a 63-year-old woman at Aged Care Sagewood in Strathmore. They say the suspect was later found dead in Calgary. Investigators say both the victim and the suspect were known to each other. BC's chief coroner says more than 10,000 people have died due to illicit drugs since the province declared a public health emergency back in 2016. Lisa Lapointe says with an average of 6 deaths per day, the number of drug-related deaths in the first half of this year has already surpassed those of the same period last year. New data from the coroner service says more than 75% of those who died this year were males between the ages of 30 and 59. Illicit drug toxicity is the leading cause of unnatural death in British Columbia. Supporters of Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs rallied in Vancouver against the Coastal GasLink pipeline being built in northern British Columbia. Hereditary Chief Namox says the pipeline company is proposing to drill under a river that members of the Wet'suwet'en Nation depend upon. While a number of elected band councils along the 670-kilometer pipeline route have signed off, Namox says Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs have not consented to the project, and their traditional territory has never been surrendered.
Our 22,000 square kilometers is unceded, non-treaty, and undefeated. So the province of British Columbia and the federal government only have assumed and presumed authority. We've never given that up. And for the consultation process, they've not come to us. They've gone to the band elect system. The band elect only have jurisdiction within the reserve boundary, which is the same as a municipality. The territory itself, that belongs to the houses and the clans. We are the head speakers for our houses and clans, and they have said no. We've said no, and these pipelines will not exist on our territory.
A former Supreme Court of Canada judge working with the inquiry into the Nova Scotia mass shooting says he's deeply concerned that the federal Justice Department has been discouraging witnesses from being forthcoming with evidence. In a letter to the department, Thomas Cromwell cited advice that the department gave RCMP Chief Superintendent Chris Leather before he testified at the inquiry last month. Leather claimed he was advised not to proactively disclose emails, phone calls, or a conversation with Commissioner Brenda Lucki held more than a week after the shootings of April of 2020. The meeting was focused on the effectiveness of the Nova Scotia RCMP's news conferences in the days after a man disguised as a Mountie shot and killed 22 people. Now, following a meeting of the House of Commons Public Safety Committee, Conservative MP Raquel Dancho spoke about the alleged political interference in the investigation of the 2020 Nova Scotia mass shooting.
There was no commitment to bring forward more witnesses. In particular, there seems to be one particular political staff at the center of this that we have yet to hear from, and that is Zita Astrovas. She is the Chief of Staff to Minister Blair, was the Chief of Staff to him during his time as Public Safety Minister during the Nova Scotia mass murder. And she seems to have been the chief liaison between the RCMP and the government. And so we do believe it is imperative that we hear from her. We also listed, as you would have seen in committee, a number of other individuals who have yet to hear from.
The federal government announced that they have reached an agreement with the union representing healthcare workers with Indigenous Services Canada. The new deal would triple recruitment and retention allowances for nurses in many remote and isolated communities across the country through the year 2025.
Indigenous communities, often the providers, the nurses, they are the backbone of communities. They are the people that are turned to in all kinds of situations. And oftentimes they're working in very remote and isolated communities to deliver vital healthcare services that are critical to the health and welfare of communities. And I want to start with a huge thank you, actually, to all nurses and healthcare workers across the country that have been working so hard day and night to keep people safe, not just from COVID-19, but to help people maintain and improve their health and treat conditions and chronic illnesses across the country in a time where the demands on them have been extraordinary.
The federal Minister of Public Safety, Marco Mendicino, announced an investment of $675,000 in Quantum Safe Canada. The minister said the funding will help raise awareness and preparedness for the threat that quantum computing poses to cybersecurity.
On a micro level, we know that hackers can take aim at every element of a person's cyber life, from banking to health to your Spotify account. And on a macro level, critical systems like power grids and telecommunications networks are ripe targets for all manner of hostile actors. The threats, they exist. And as a government, it is our obligation to work with some very important partners to make sure that we can mitigate against them.
You know, it's one of the most familiar sounds at a hockey game, the sound of an organ. No game would be complete without it. Well, for the first time in 30 years, the Calgary Flames are looking for a part-time organist. Calgary Sports and Entertainment Corporation needs to replace Willie Jewson, who passed away earlier this year after 34 years in the position. The corporation says it's looking to hire someone at the Scotiabank Saddledome for both Flames games and for those of its new American Hockey League affiliate, the Calgary Wranglers. The organist is to be responsible for playing popular music, crowd chants, and the Canadian and American national anthems. The heat warning continued from Environment Canada today across much of southwestern Alberta, and those sizzling hot temperatures will be remaining for quite some time. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, if you're wanting to work on your tan, this just might be the week for you. Sunny and sizzling hot. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a detailed look at the forecast. Jeanette, how long will the sizzling hot temperatures be sticking around?
Well, you know, Hal, it's going to last a little while there. I did hear from a viewer today named Frank, and he asked me to please send some cooler weather. Unfortunately, Frank, this hot weather is going to persist through the week into Wednesday. We're looking at high of 29, up to 31 on Thursday, 33 the high on Friday. Look at that temperature for Saturday. We're looking at 35 degrees high under sunny skies, 32 on Sunday, and then rounding out that 7-day forecast. a high of 29. So it looks like 29 is really the coolest temperature all week. Average high for this time of year, 26. Average low, 10 degrees. 36, that was our high temperature on this day back in 1962. And back in 2000, we had the chilliest, which was 4 degrees. 6:23 is when the sun rose this morning, and 8:48 p.m. is our sunset this evening, giving us 14 hours and 25 minutes of daylight. So we're seeing those days definitely getting shorter. Beautiful warm day in Victoria tomorrow, 27 the high, 27. Same thing there for Vancouver. A little bit windy in the Strait of Georgia though, 27 the high also in Edmonton. And Calgary sitting at 27 degrees tomorrow under sunny skies. Calgary also under a heat warning, which will persist throughout the week as well there. Saskatoon looking at a 30% chance of showers in the afternoon, 28 the high there. 27 the high in Regina, also seeing some afternoon showers. 27 the high in Winnipeg tomorrow under clear skies. So it's going to be a hot one in Winnipeg tomorrow, also with a humidex of 30, making it even hotter. 28 the high in Toronto with a chance of showers. Scattered showers expected tomorrow in Ottawa, high of 26. 23 the high in Montreal with a 40% chance of showers in the afternoon. As we're looking to the East Coast, we're seeing a lot of rain. 2 to 4 millimeters in Fredericton, high of 22 degrees. Halifax looking at 5 to 10 millimeters, 20 millimeters in the heaviest hit areas of rain. 19 the high only there, 21 in Charlottetown, seeing some scattered showers there, and a 60% chance of showers as well in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 17 degrees. So there you go. That is your forecast.
An economist says despite inflation, Canadian spending has been fairly strong in the first half of the year. TD chief economist Beata Caranci says that fuels the need for more interest rate hikes. Economists are expecting the Bank of Canada to raise its key interest rate by 0.75 of a percentage point next month. Earlier today, Stats Canada reported that inflation slowed from 8.1% in June to 7.6% last month. Canadian Pacific Railway says it has received regulatory approval for its acquisition of Kansas City Southern. CP agreed last year to buy KCS in an agreement valued at $130 billion US. That includes the assumption of $3.8 billion in debt. The deal still requires approval by the U.S. Surface Transportation Board. The deal closed in December, but the shares of KCS were placed into a voting trust that allows the U.S. Railway to operate independently while the government completes its review. CP says it expects the review to be completed early next year. Turning wastewater into renewable energy isn't something you hear of every day. Now that's what the company Shark Energy Systems does on a regular basis. The organization was founded by Lynn Mueller, who's originally from Champion, Alberta. Mueller says they've installed a piece of machinery called the Piranha T10 in the Lake Louise Inn that recovers all of the heat from 3 washing machines.
So they have these big commercial washers where they're doing all the sheets and towels and such. And then they were just dumping all this really warm water, like, kind of 50 degrees C, 120 degree Fahrenheit water just down the drain. So we just intercept it, put it through our Piranha, strip all that heat back out of it, and then put it back down the drain. So it's just such a simple system to do. And we were able to fit it right in the laundry room. They're on propane there too, so it's very, very expensive. And the carbon intensity is high. So the system there saves them, I think it's 30,000 liters of propane a year. And so it's about $1 something a liter. So the savings were a no-brainer.
Mueller says the Piranha T10 reduced the Lake Louise Inn's laundry water heating energy demand by as much as 45%. Now here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 89 points on the day to finish at 20,269. The Dow was up 239 points to 34,152. The S&P 500 was up 8 points on the day to 4305. And the Nasdaq was down 25 points to 13,102. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $2.29 to $87.12 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 62 cents to $9.35 US. Gold was down 5 cents to $17.75.64 US an ounce. And silver was also down a cent to $20.14 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.61 per bushel. Barley's at $7.79. Canola's at $18.46, and corn is at $10.80 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.55 to $141.30. Feeder cattle were up $1.60 to $181.53, and lean hogs October contract was down $4 to $96.58. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 77.85 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Ottawa announced that it has reached an agreement with the union representing healthcare workers with Indigenous Services Canada. The new deal will triple recruitment and retention allowances for nurses in many remote and isolated communities across the country through the year 2025. The Trudeau Liberals have been allegedly pushing back on reports that point to court documents showing the government did not have a scientific basis for imposing vaccine mandates on air travel. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details next. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We would love to hear from you.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Whoop Up Days are back as we celebrate 125 years. Beginning August 23rd, take in the parade through downtown Lethbridge, and then at Exhibition Park, enjoy a full 5 days of your favorite sights, sounds, smells, and tastes. Besides an amazing assortment of rides on the Midway, this year's fair will feature a brand new La Gallery Art Showcase, an outdoor beach party, a mini carnival for the kids, and a Southern Alberta culinary experience like no other. So much more to see and do. For more information, visit whoopupdays.ca. Go back in time and see what it was like to live as a pioneer. Coyote Flats Pioneer Village is a Western heritage museum located 1.5 kilometers south of Pitcher Butte. Walk through the village and see a railway station, post office, fire hall, school, and so much more. This museum is open daily from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with admission of $10 for adults or $20 per family. For more information, visit coyoteflats.org. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
More and more Canadians are still finding it tough paying their bills and even buying groceries these days. Even though inflation cooled somewhat last month, times are still pretty tough for a lot of us. Now, to discuss this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly. Brian, what were the big numbers that stood out to you in the inflation report?
Well, the good number is that it's overall inflation is down. We went down from 8.1 to 7.6. I wouldn't break out the champagne yet. First off, it cost more than it used to. Secondly, everything else is still costing more. 7.6% is still a very high, unsustainable inflation rate. And food continues to be something that we see going higher and higher. So that hits family budgets the hardest. There was a bit of a reprieve in terms of gasoline, and I think that was a big part of it. I think we're also seeing some of the impact of the Bank of Canada raising interest rates to try and cool the housing market, to try and lower inflation. And we definitely have seen housing prices come down. That's not, a big part of what has been driving inflation has been the basics of life: gasoline, food. We're going to continue to see inflation over 7% over the next several months, including, in fact, I'm told up until March or later next year. So, think about that. I've been speaking with some restaurateurs who have been describing the cost to them. And so, if you're able to stop out for a burger somewhere at a local restaurant, don't be surprised to see the price going up, because these guys are scraping by, trying not to raise their prices, while everything that goes into running their operation has been going up dramatically.
Now, the Trudeau Liberals have been criticized for not having a plan to deal with inflation. Are they taking any credit for this drop? And is the federal government making any moves to really counter inflation right now?
Well, the prime minister hasn't come out and said, "See, I told you I'd fix inflation." Maybe because, well, last summer, or a summer ago, a year ago, he said he didn't think much about it. And they've tried over and over again to say that there's nothing that they could do. So, yeah, there's some liberal supporters out there trying to claim that, see, the government's plan is working. I wouldn't declare victory just yet. But they don't really have a plan beyond using the Bank of Canada and the rise in interest rates. Now, they don't direct the Bank of Canada, but they've made it clear what they want, and they're just appear to be sitting back and letting that happen. That's a very blunt instrument, raising interest rates. It has had an immediate effect on the housing market. It does hurt people with lines of credit. A lot of businesses run on lines of credit. I know a lot of seniors who, or people getting close to retirement, they've put the small remainder of their mortgage on a line of credit. All kinds of people use lines of credit. Those go up along with variable rate mortgages, and in your mortgage when you're renewing is going to go up as well. So all of these things compound. It's a blunt instrument. There have been reports, and we've talked about them before, Hal, saying that there should be using a cut in government spending to try and do this. They've refused to do it. They say, we've done our part. There's nothing more for us to do. This is going to inflict a lot of pain before things get better sometime next year.
Now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just returned from a 2-week holiday in Costa Rica, Brian. You said if the Prime Minister had to experience what many travelers go through, he might order his cabinet ministers to find solutions. What did you mean by that?
Well, two of the biggest bottlenecks in Canadian airports are security screening and customs. The government wants to keep blaming the airlines, and there's this narrative out there, well, the airlines sold tickets they couldn't fulfill, and they sold more seats than they had, or the airports aren't running efficiently. I'm sorry, this is a false narrative being put forward by the government. What's the big slowdown when you go to an airport? Not just Pearson, primarily Pearson in Toronto, but not just there. Well, long lineups to get your baggage checked and have everything screened through security. Who's responsible for that? The federal government. Guess what? When Justin Trudeau went to Costa Rica 2 weeks ago, he didn't go through security like that. I'm not saying he should, but he doesn't understand what it's like. There have been lines of 2 and 3 hours over the past several months, and they're not constant. It's not every flight and every day, but there are periods where people are waiting 2 and 3 hours. Then on the way back into the country, if you happen to leave Canada, you're going to hit a big customs line. Well, the only people responsible for customs are the federal government. That's it. You can't blame that on the airlines. And yet over the weekend, we had photos and videos posted all over social media showing huge lines, jam-packed customs halls. We're still telling people at airports, oh, you should social distance. They can't. It's not physically possible when you've got that many people. The customs hall's full. It's going up the stairwell. It's going up the hallway towards where the planes are let off. A little while ago, it was declared a fire hazard at Toronto's Pearson Airport. There were too many people in the customs hall. That's how bad things have gotten. Justin Trudeau doesn't see that when he comes back into Canada. If he did, he'd be telling his two ministers, Marco Mendicino, in charge of the Border Services Agency through public safety, and Omar Alghabra, in charge of CATSA, get things fixed. Maybe drop the ArriveCan app, which everyone tells you is a big bottleneck. It's a slowdown. It's worked for me when I've used it, Hal, but it doesn't work for everyone. And when you've got a lot of seniors with language barriers coming through, and you've got this glitchy app that only works in English and French, good luck.
The Liberals, Brian, have been pushing back on reports that point to court documents showing the government did not have a scientific basis for imposing the vaccine mandates on air travel. What do these court documents have to say?
These are court documents that were filed as part of a lawsuit. And so this lawsuit has been ongoing, 4 different lawsuits, in fact. This particular one brought about by 2 men who didn't get vaccinated for their own reasons. They wanted to go visit family in Britain. They were not able to get onto a plane in Canada. They could have arrived in Britain. Now, there are some countries where you can't fly into if you're not vaccinated. There's nothing the Canadian government could do on that. But they were being blocked by Canadian government rules that said because they were not vaccinated, they could not get on a plane here. So they launched a lawsuit. There have been hearings. Officials from the Public Health Agency of Canada testifying under oath that they were not consulted, including the woman who approved the vaccines for use in Canada. Were you consulted on whether this was necessary? No. Were there studies done? No, there were not studies. So all of these court documents, this testimony under oath was filed in another court proceeding. That made them public documents. We're able to get access to them. I've posted them online. Others have posted them online. The Liberals are trying to claim that this is not true, that these documents don't say that. It's there in black and white for people to see. I even linked to a study that the government still has posted on their website on the issue of transmission. What's the likelihood of catching COVID from an unvaccinated passenger on a plane? And the number was 1 passenger in every 1.7 million.
Wow.
That was shocking to me. It's still on the government website. It was introduced into evidence in court. How can people say that this is not true? Well, they don't really push back on the facts. They just try and muddy the waters and send out people like Mark Garrettson, who seems to be one of the Liberals' attack dogs, and doesn't mind embarrassing himself to make these claims, spread it on social media. The TrueAnon supporters lap it up and share it everywhere. The court documents are public. People can read them for themselves and see what's there under oath from federal officials.
It was reported last week that there was a potential for a breakthrough in discussions between the federal government and the Truckers for the Freedom Convoy just before the Emergencies Act was invoked. Now, some people are saying that Justin Trudeau passed on the chance for a settlement with the truckers, but you say he was never interested at all. Why do you say that?
Well, just look at the way that he had reacted to the convoy from before they even arrived in Ottawa. I've had lots of people say, why would he negotiate with Nazis? They had swastika flags, or, all these things that happened early on. He didn't want to talk to them beforehand. He described them before they arrived as people with, what was the term he used? That they were not unacceptable views. Justin Trudeau was never interested. He knew that polling was on his side. Especially by the time the Emergencies Act was invoked, or in the days before, about 2/3 of Canadians were saying, look, it's time to go home. Even people that had sympathy earlier on or may supported the ideas had come to the conclusion, look, this is going too far. And so Trudeau knew that. He knew that the majority of Canadians, including a good number of Conservatives, didn't support what was going on in Ottawa. He also knew that his core base of support, his voting coalition, wanted these guys punished. They didn't want him talking to them. They would have balked at the idea that he would, or anyone in the government would talk to them. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson had someone go and negotiate with them to move trucks out of residential areas. I think that was a great thing. They weren't going to clear out the entire convoy at that point, but they got the trucks out of the residential areas. Watson was attacked by Progressive Ottawa for that. So there was no way that Trudeau was going to risk that. He wanted a fight. He picked a fight. He got a fight. And he looked good in the eyes of the people who back him. And that's what this was about. As with so many things, it's about optics and politics with Trudeau. It's not about facts. It's not about outcomes other than, does it help me politically?
Brian, it's been a year since the fall of Kabul to the Taliban. The Trudeau Liberals say they want to bring in thousands of Afghans who help the Canadian military. But now, so far, the government's response to resettle many Afghans in Canada has fallen short of their goals. Some say we may have abandoned people in Afghanistan who stuck out their necks for us.
Yeah, people who worked as interpreters, as guides, as fixers, as suppliers for the Canadian forces or other arms of the Canadian government that were present in Afghanistan before we abandoned it. I think the number is just over 17,000 that they wanted to bring in under that program for people who worked with us, and they brought in less than half. This should have been dealt with more than a year ago, before Kabul fell. We knew that the Americans were withdrawing. We knew that the Taliban was gaining strength. The government didn't step up at the time. So now they've got about 8,000 people who've been approved to come to Canada, but they can't get out. The Taliban isn't exactly running an open border country in Afghanistan. Many of them won't have travel documents like passports. And to ask for a passport from the Taliban can lead to repercussions. So it's not safe for them to do so. And then there's about 3,000 that have not been vetted to come to Canada, according to government documents. So all of this is very disturbing. I had a lot of family, friends, acquaintances pass through various parts of the Canadian mission over more than a decade. And they always spoke about how they relied on locals just to be able to get the job done. And people that we did help, or people that did help us, we didn't help them. We abandoned them.
So let's talk about vetting for just a moment here, Brian. How can we be certain that many of the Afghans being brought into Canada will be properly vetted and not jihadists posing as refugees?
Well, you're unlikely to want to come to Canada if you are living in Taliban Afghanistan and you are a jihadist. I mean, you're living in your dream world currently, because this is the setup that they want. I don't think so. There's plans to bring in 40,000 Afghans. I don't think that if we come close to that number, that we will be bringing in people who are still in Afghanistan. We will be bringing in people who fled the country already and happen to be in refugee camps elsewhere. If we're dealing with that pool of people, then yeah, we're able to do the best kind of vetting that we can on anyone, whether it's Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war with Russia or Syrian refugees fleeing. They go through a vetting process, an identity check process, the best that we can. I'm glad that they're doing vetting on that side of the ocean at this point, because when the Trudeau government was first elected and they had the big promise for 25,000 Syrian refugees, one of the proposals was, let's just fill a plane, we'll vet people when they get here at Trenton Air Base. Well, the problem with that is once they're in the country, you can't get rid of them if they do happen to be terrorists or jihadists. And we saw that with Rwanda. We brought in people to escape what happened in Rwanda with the genocide. And then we also brought in some of their torturers and tormentors. And then once those people were here, we could not get rid of them. It was on the record that they had committed crimes, but it just took so long. And then they're living next to the people they tortured. I can't imagine what it's like to go through a genocide like that and then have the people that committed it against you brought in by the country that said they were going to save you. So at least we're doing the vetting on the other side of the ocean.
Brian, we only have a few short moments left here, but I wanted to chit-chat a bit about the CPC leadership. Now, a new Conservative leader is set to be picked on September the 10th. Pierre Poilievre is ramping up his rallies again and drawing huge crowds. Is there any doubt that he'll win this?
If there's doubt that he'll win it, it's pretty small. And even the Charest Camp's numbers that they put out a while ago, claiming they had a path to victory, it was a very narrow path. Could that happen? It could. It is unlikely. But, it's such an bizarre voting system that we won't know the result until the end. But I've spoken to people who support Pierre Poilievre who say he's got it in the bag on the first vote. I spoke to somebody who's worked on the other campaigns who does not want Pierre Poilievre to win, who still said no, he's going to win it first ballot, 50% of the vote in every province. So that's one of the bold predictions that I've heard on this. For Jean Charest to win it, it's got to go several ballots, and he has to take 75% of the points in Quebec, 50% of the points in Ontario, he says. That's a big hill to climb. Several of the organizers for Patrick Brown that Charest had been hoping to bring in, especially in the Toronto area, they've gone over to the Poilievre camp now.
Wow. Be interesting to see how this all shakes out by September the 10th. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
What a summer it's turning out to be, politically speaking. On the provincial side, we have 7 candidates vying for the spot at Premier, and I'm sure that for UCP members, their choice of who to vote for is changing daily. When we look federally, there is a conservative struggle for leadership, and then there's the exploration of Alberta autonomy and separatism options. Joining me today on this trip down the rabbit hole is Cypress Medicine Hat Independent MLA Drew Barnes. Drew, welcome back to Bridge City News. So great to have you on.
Oh, thanks again for talking to me. I so appreciate it. It's good to have a chance to discuss these important ideas.
Yeah, they really are. So Drew, we have to kick this conversation off with a talk about those UCP leadership candidates. So some people talk about picking someone who can beat Rachel Notley as a primary consideration. So what would you suggest as the key for picking that UCP leader?
Well, it's not that. It's not, down the road to Rachel Notley, and it's not a mythical fear of splitting the vote. If you don't vote for what you want, you'll never get it. So I'd ask Albertans to step up and vote for who best represents their values. And that's the important issue right there, is let's concentrate and let's support UCP leaders that enhance and promote conservative values. Economic freedom, individual opportunity, families having a bigger role in our culture and our society. The race to this point in time hasn't seen much of that. That to me is not only disappointing, it's also uninspiring. So again, to me, no, let's vote for our values. Instead of these straw men of who might beat Rachel Notley or who might do this or that. No, let's support those who best enhances conservative values.
Okay, so now Drew, you have known most, if not all of these people for a long time. So when you look at the various candidates, do you see some red flags that you think maybe people should know about?
Well, again, I'm at this point in time, I'm concerned that the race has been less than about conservative values than it should have been. I'm concerned that it's been so uninspiring. One contestant has put out 2 or 3 ideas, and that seems to have directed everybody's attention. It's time to talk about lower taxes. It's time to talk about more competitive utilities and insurance situations, so Alberta families have a better chance for more economic freedom and more freedom in general. So I see red flags for all of them right now. Back to Premier Jason Kenney, who so never met expectations, who so clearly didn't understand Albertans or Alberta values. Anyone targeting the status quo is of great concern, of course. But the silver lining here is I think their membership sales end August 12th. So after August 12th, the race changes from trying to sell as many $10 memberships as possible to competing on ideas and platforms. So I hope some real conservative ideas will come forward.
Okay, so you are an independent. You were once a member, you were actually an MLA for the UCP, so you are unable to vote in this. But if things were changed, I mean, obviously there were some rough waters there for you. Who would you be voting for if you had the chance to, or would we see your name up there as one of the contendants?
Well, thank you for that. I'm very pleased to represent Cypress Medicine Hat and Albertans, to be one of the 87 Albertans paid to speak on your behalf. Actually, I was kicked out of the UCP caucus last May, so it's about 15 or 16 months ago now. And I still am a UCP member, so I am eligible to vote. I'm just not part of the UCP caucus. But I guess what's, again, is most important to me is let's make families and communities and community groups bigger, and let's make government smaller. And I haven't seen any of the candidates talk about that. Where do you start? There's 9 American states with no income tax. Oil and gas royalties in Alberta hit $16.2 billion last year, up from $3.2 billion the year before. That's an incredible amount of money that could be used to reduce taxes, to enhance public programs, to make more freedom for Alberta families. I don't think I've heard a single one of the 7 candidates talk about that yet. So that to me is disappointing. And again, my conservative values, Cypress Medicine Hat's values, are we want a government that leaves us alone, that gets out of our way. Jeanette, we're so, everybody says to me, Alberta is landlocked and we were having problems getting our resources moved. The real truth of the matter is we are policy locked by Ottawa and the rest of Canada. It's time to address those things. And I hope that some of the officials, some of the people running for leader will do that.
Okay, so what would be your suggestions then for a course of action for Alberta working with Ottawa?
Okay, well, thank you for that one. My strongest suggestion was when I put out my dissenting opinion on the Fair Deal panel, which is 2 years ago. I said 3 years from now or 3 years from then, Albertans should have an independence referendum. We should just put Ottawa on notice. Ottawa, it's time to give us resource movement. We have the 3rd biggest oil reserve in the world, and we're only number 5 producer, so we're not up to our potential. We all know that India and China, with 250 coal-fired electric generation plants coming online over the next few years, if we could get them our liquefied natural gas, that would make the world better for everyone. But we never talk the truth. So let's make that one of the necessary requirements. Secondly, our House of Commons, our Supreme Court representation is so inadequate compared to our population. That needs to be changed as well. Banking laws are geared around home ownership in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. Banking laws aren't geared around resource extraction or agriculture in Western Canada. The carbon tax punishes Western economies dramatically. And I think the best thing to do is just put Ottawa on notice. We demand and we expect a fair deal, and 3 years from now we're going to hold them accountable. But also at the same time, like Quebec legislature does all the time, they use the notwithstanding clause consistently. It's time that the Premier of Alberta start to use a notwithstanding clause so we get the same deal Quebec has. So we get Alberta first. Yes, we can be a strong part of Canada, but we deserve and need fair treatment. So let's look at the main thing here is to start collecting our own taxes. So we have the infrastructure in place so we can be more sovereign. We have to control our own immigration like Quebec does. Our own pension plan would be $3 billion more annually in benefits for our seniors and seniors that can't afford utilities right now. Our own unemployment insurance would do exactly the same and allow us to pinpoint immigration to the type of people we need, like the type of professionals we need to fill jobs and the areas we need them in. There's so many things that Alberta should be doing like Quebec. I've heard Albertans say it, what Quebec has, we want, and absolutely.
So, Drew, it almost sounds like you're talking about sovereignty. So, are you in favor of the Sovereignty Act?
Well, there's lots I like about the Sovereignty Act. First of all, it is challenging Ottawa. Um, what concerns me though is the timing. The main things we need to do is create our own Alberta infrastructure, collect our own taxes, handle our own unemployment insurance, have our own pension plan, our own police force is another thing that could be done. Control of our immigration to get the best people in the best spots. Those things need to be done first. My concern with the Sovereignty Act is we're asking Albertans to basically do some things that are against the laws of Canada. Let's set Alberta on a path to be free and prosperous.
Okay. So then, with that said, I have to ask you about Danielle Smith. Obviously, she's a huge fan of the Sovereignty Act, but of course, some may be thinking that she's cresting right now in her popularity. But I guess when we look back at her track record of her political decisions, she's not always had a lot of wins. So I know she's been talking about banning cabinet ministers from the World Economic Forum and has suggestions about Alberta going net zero. So in your opinion, will she be able to follow through on her plans if she is elected leader?
I am so surprised that she's so much in favor of net zero in Trudeau's plan. I was not elected to help Justin Trudeau destroy Alberta's oil and gas industry. I've seen reports that working towards net zero will not only cost Alberta 150 to 200,000 jobs, but it will make electricity 3 times more expensive. And it doesn't solve the problem, as we talked about 2 minutes ago, of getting, good liquefied natural gas to India and China, where so much of the coal-fired electric generation has happened. I'm grateful that Cypress Medicine had elected me in 2012. I was one of the 17 Wild Rosers with Danielle Smith. I was one of the first to put my foot down, to refuse to cross the floor. That was a huge turning point for Alberta. And, it's I guess for anybody voting in this leadership, they have to consider that all that happened and what went down. And, I think there was 5 of us that stayed and 11 that left. And, those are considerations for sure. But I will say this at this point. I mean, I will give Danielle credit in this early part of the leadership race. She has set the agenda by being the one out there with some ideas. And I would suggest to the Todd Lowens and the Travis Taves, and the Rebecca Schultzes and the Rajan Sanis and Brian Jeans, get your ideas out there too. And be strong. And I would say to Albertans, vote for your values.
Okay.
Vote for your values.
There you go. Well, with that said, you have some guiding principles that you promote on your social media, Drew. So maybe why don't you tell us about those?
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, it's based on 3 things: economic freedom, individual opportunity, and having good, strong public programs. And to me, that means choice in our public programs. Alberta's got the 3rd biggest oil reserve in the world. We're 16.2 billion last year in oil and gas taxes collected, oil and gas royalties. I believe it's 80% of the oil sands projects are now past their cost of capital recovery. So they'll be paying 25% royalties to the people of Alberta. There's 9 American states that pay no income tax. Rachel Notley eliminated our 10% flat tax and put the higher end to 15. At the same time, Justin Trudeau raised our federal taxes, for which we get so little value in return, 5% as well. So 4 or 5 years ago was a huge tax hit on our freedoms. So let's get back to our 10% flat tax. Let's end our 2% small business tax. Nobody's been hit harder in the pandemic than small business. We need small business to provide great services, choice, and competition. Let's give them a chance to have some hope and some future. Let's stop all this corporate welfare. I mean, the biggest thing I hear about in Cypress Medicine Hat is wherever Jason Kenney goes, he leaves a trail of millions of dollars of our tax money behind him. Stop it. Leave us alone. Taxes lower and give us a chance to grow on our own. That's what I promote on social media. More economic freedom, more individual opportunity.
Okay, so then do you have an idea of how we could lower taxes and still increase Alberta's bottom line then?
Yeah, well, I sure do. First of all, end the 2% small business tax. Small businesses pay an additional 10% to Ottawa. Not much we can do about that until we show more strength and autonomy. It's about 200 million a year. Is that what it collects? Alberta Health Services last year was almost 26 billion. We could easily carve that 200 million out of what goes into bureaucracy and management in Alberta Health Services. Again, our oil and gas business, we have the third biggest reserve in the world. We're number 5 producer. There's lots of room to make things happen. What we've lost is we've lost the opportunity to help small investors, small business people be stronger in oil and gas, as an example. We've created a situation where they have to have so much reserves to meet their liability for cleanup. It is time to look at a system where all companies have to clean up a certain percentage of their wells rather than just buy more production. Let's not only encourage the big guy to be strong, let's give all Albertans a chance to be strong in those things. Agriculture is another great opportunity for us. More irrigation opportunities, absolutely, for sure. More competition and even some infrastructure. I mean, in Medicine Hat, we're quite envious of Lethbridge because how Lethbridge has grown. And of course, you've got those 3 potato factories, twinning Highway 3. So we can just join up with more of the good things going on in the Lethbridge economy. We can all work together. That's absolutely something that has to be looked at. I spent earlier this morning talking to people about 2 water storage opportunities here off the South Saskatchewan around Medicine Hat. Those are things that we have to look at to make it happen. But number 1 is government has to tax less and streamline all the regulations. Jason Kenney claimed he was cutting red tape. He did so very little, and you can't cut red tape realistically unless you cut the size and the cost of government. So let's do that.
Okay, it looks like we are about out of time here, but thanks so much for joining us today, Drew. Great to have you on.
Oh, it's great to talk to you again. All the best to you.
Thank you. That was Drew Barnes from Cypress Medicine Hat, who is an independent MLA there. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.